The White House sent the questions to you ahead of the interview.
Yes, effective immediately. I am no longer an on-air host at WURD.
Word Radio is not a mouthpiece for the Biden or any other administration.
That was Andrea Lawful-Sanders admitting that questions she asked of Joe Biden during an interview were actually created and submitted by the Biden campaign so that he would know exactly which question was going to be asked. And this is not a unique situation to her interview. There's another radio host that has also admitted his questions were submitted by the Biden campaign. And it makes sense that someone who would be dumb enough to accept questions from the campaign that you're supposedly going to be questioning would also be dumb enough to admit that the questions she asked were submitted and created by the Biden campaign.
Andrea, let me ask you here about your interviews and something. I listened to both of them, and there's something that's similar here. You each were, you asked 4 questions, and maybe that's what you were allowed to ask by the campaign or the White House. But they were essentially the same questions, both interviews, about accomplishments, progress in your respective state, what's at stake in the election, what he has to say about his debate performance, and what he would say to voters who think their vote doesn't matter or might sit this election out. Were those questions given to you by the White House, or did you have, or the campaign, or did you have to submit questions ahead of this interview?
The questions were sent to me for approval. I approved of them.
Okay, so the White House sent the questions to you ahead of the interview?
Yes.
Okay.
I got several questions, 8 of them, and the 4 that were chosen were the ones that I approved.
Okay. And the reason I ask is not a criticism of either view. It's just that if the White House is trying now to prove the vim, vigor, acuity of the president, I don't know how they do that by sending questions first before the interview so that the president knows what's coming.
But aside from the fact that they performed literal propaganda interviews, what makes it even more interesting is that she lost her job at the radio station because of this interview.
Effective immediately. I am no longer an on-air host at WURD.
Where the policy.
Andrea Lawful-Sanders announced her departure from Word in a post to her followers on Instagram Sunday.
I tendered my resignation yesterday.
I'm glad that you all were patient.
Lawful-Sanders, who hosted a radio show called The Source on Word, made headlines following her interview with President Biden that aired on July 4th.
I have a few questions for you. The first one is, a lot of people are talking about the debate and your performance. Is there any reason for the American people to be concerned?
No, I had a bad debate.
Yeah.
I had a bad debate.
But days after the interview, Lawful-Sanders admitted to CNN that the interview was based on questions that were given to her by the Biden campaign.
Yes. I got several questions, 8 of them, and the 4 that were chosen were the ones that I approved.
Interview the President of the United States.
Wisconsin radio host Earl Ingram also interviewed the president and said he received a list of 4 questions in advance. A spokesperson for the Biden campaign told CBS News, quote, "We do not condition interviews on acceptance of these questions, and hosts are always free to ask the questions they think will best inform their listeners." Word President and CEO Sarah Lomax confirmed Lawful-Sanders' departure from the Black-owned talk radio station. Lomax said the interview was arranged and negotiated without the knowledge of management and, quote, "violates our practice of remaining an independent media outlet." Lomax went on to say Word Radio is not a mouthpiece for the Biden or any other administration.
There was one more notable part of the interview that she did on CNN. During her propaganda interview with Biden, there was a moment where he was talking about black people and all the DEI hires that he's made, where he actually said that he was the first black vice president or the first black president or both. I'm not really sure because he makes no sense because he's a senile old man. Regardless of what the resident-in-chief was attempting to say there, she was then asked about it on CNN, and she did exactly what you would expect a propagandist to do, which was to defend him.
By the way, I'm proud to be, as I said, the first vice president, first black woman, served with a black president. I'm proud of the first black woman in the Supreme Court. There's just so much that we can do because together there's nothing. Look, this is the United States of America.
Let me play here a bit of your interview. This is, and you've probably seen it's gotten a lot of attention. This is when he was asked about his accomplishments as president. Let's play it.
I'm proud to be, as I said, the first vice president, first black woman, served with a black president.
Did you hear, as it's being covered, the president say that he was proud to be the first black woman president? Because that's what the headlines all over the internet are suggesting.
I find it interesting that they saw and heard that. What I got from him was that he was intimating that Kamala Harris was the first black woman vice president. And I guess with his speech impediment, they heard something else. And I find it interesting that that was the only thing that they picked out of that entire conversation and ran with it. Look, we have a hard way to go in this country. I am listening to the community that is speaking to me every single day on WURD radio. We are answering, looking at the things that are mattering to us. We can't afford to get excited and flumble about what folks are thinking about the president and his frailty and his speeches. We are concerned about the purging of the government in Project 2025. We've been talking about this on WURD since January, fully and completely. The slashing of the Department of Justice and dismantling the FBI and replacing their traditional independence from political pressure with fealty to the administration. Those are the things that matter to us in the Black community. So when I ask them, what matters most to you, that President Biden has this speech impediment or that he's slowing down versus the other person who has all these other things going on, they keep saying to me, we did it on Friday on The Source, we did it Thursday, we keep asking them, they keep saying the same thing. We want the Democrats to win because we feel like if we do anything else, it's going to be a problem for us. What I'm concerned about is that no one really seems to be in the community talking to the very people who has the vote.
I get instructions from my wife